Hi, I'm Tyson.
I'm Colin.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Adam.
And we're the Gamesmiths, and we just got done playing the Battlefront version of Trade Worlds. We want to go through this feedback form and talk to you a bit about our experience. To start, the first question we have on this list is regarding accessibility. The question is, was the game too simple or overly complex?
Personally, I think it was good. There were a little thing to be perfectly honest, and we'll touch on this in the design. The card design kind of made things a little confusing, but other than that, I thought once we had played through and we had done everything once, I kind of felt I understood it. Mm-hmm. After I had one combat round, I felt I understood combat. After I had I don't think it was overly complex at all. I think it was a right amount of complexity. It wasn't too simple. There were always choices to make.
I would say that I think the roles themselves are kind of complex. Like, I feel like you could add in a few of these together. I never wanted to do commander, engineer, or captain. It seems like you could make that one thing and you get to choose. You can put two cards together, but you have too many options here, and it doesn't. I just kind of wondered, why am I not able to attack in the same turn that I do like something else?
And for me, it was a little overwhelming to have so many options and most of them be irrelevant for most turns. There are a few here that I never even used, but I agree that there was some complexity, but it was all up front at the start of it. I think that once you experienced it, I get it, and then you move forward. So I don't think it was overly complex, except maybe in the rules a little bit and the front experience of it. And I think we'll talk a little bit about that.
Decisions were easy, but the choices were limited based on what was better for you.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything to add about the complexity?
No. I just think for a deck builder, it's a simple deck builder, but deck builders aren't necessarily simple games. So if we're talking accessibility to the whole population, if you're into deck builders, I think it's a simple deck builder.
True.
Yeah. But not everyone knows deck builders.
So then the next question is, does understanding of card drafting give a player an edge? And I think I want to clarify this. I don't really know that there's really card drafting per se in this game. I think what I'm understanding this question as is deck building.
Like you're purchasing cards?
Are you purchasing your cards and building your deck? Does having an understanding or a firm
compared to like Legendary or Dominion.
Well, like what you were saying, Adam, I think comes into play here, because if it's not complex, if you have an understanding of deck building. There are a few things in here regarding deck building that is a little new. Holding on to cards from round to round is a little new for some deck building, as well as having your own trade row is new-ish. Most deck builders have a common trade row, and so this is a little new. So having an understanding of deck building can give you maybe a slight edge if you've never experienced it at all. But also having, in my opinion, an understanding of what cards to purchase at what time can help you have an edge, but it's not such a significant edge that I think it would make it so that a new player couldn't be competitive against an experienced player.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that you gain from having a knowledge of deck building is the value of cutting cards from your deck.
Yes.
We've all played enough that we recognize the value of that. And I remember when I first started playing deck builders, I almost saw that as a downside. If a card said, remove a card from your deck if you want to play this, I'm like, well, I don't want to do that. And then I realized, wait a minute, I got some bad cards in here, let's get them out.
I spent my first 2 turns doing that.
Yeah. So I would say, and I think we all know that. And if you are asking specifically card drafting, then the answer is no. Because
I don't think you
because you're not really drafting, and the big mechanics about drafting is trying to figure out what you can take from other players and what you want to try and get around to yourself, and figuring out what other players are picking by what cards are missing. And none of those skills really come into use here, where everything's kind of public knowledge and everybody has their own card base to purchase.
And it's
from.
randomized. It's the luck of the draw. Like you
Yeah,
can
and
have
so-
a bunch of 1s to start or a bunch of 5s, and it might screw you over or help you out.
Yeah. So the next question is, do you feel that during the game you were on an even playing field with your opponents? I think we talked a little bit about this in the last question. I think that even if you're a beginning player versus an experienced player, you can be competitive
Does it
still.
have to do with experience, though? Or
It
what?
says
Just
that
Just did you
generically
feel
on
that
the
you were on
Yeah,
an even
did you
playing
feel the
field
same?
in
I
general?
would say
The only
no.
thing that the only thing I would say that didn't make me feel on an even playing field is that my ability, like you guys were able to get your ships quicker, you were able to buy quicker. I was able to get my stuff back to my hand if something died, which didn't happen till the very end of the game. So that was the only thing. Otherwise, you have the exact same cards. Like the decks are completely the same. So I felt in even playing field that way. But other than that, no.
That's
Well-
the only place I felt off too.
Yeah.
You guys were out of the gates quicker, much quicker than we were. We had the
And
same.
we were the first two dead,
I
though.
recall an attack. He recalls a defense. But
And I would also say
for
that there's
different
there's also just this like random here when you feel like you don't have, when you feel like other people are buying better cards than you or have access to better cards. And I still feel like I have some stuff to learn about the game. I felt like maybe, some of the things where I wasn't on an even playing field would have been my fault. But I could see, especially in versions that focus less on combat, people having combat-related abilities or economic-related abilities, those are going to kind of shift, because I think you have a couple abilities that are pretty clearly combat, and a couple that are pretty clearly economic, and in an economic game, I think one has the advantage, and in a combat game, the other one kind of has an advantage. So, yeah.
So the next section that here is balance, and the first question in balance is asking, do all the players have access to the right information to make informed decisions?
I think I had access to way too much information. So at the end of the game, I was making all of my decisions based on whether or not Colin could put out another ship, and he'd have to put his hand under the table or stack it up and put a screen on top of it for me to all I have to look over and see is red, blue, green. Does he have it? And if he's not thinking and he's fanning it out to see it, I can look over and see.
Yeah, and I saw a bunch of purple, so I knew he couldn't put out another ship. So as long as I could get on another ship, I could kill Adam.
And I could mess with
survive
them a
your
lot.
attack,
So
yeah.
I mean, that gave away way too much information.
Right.
Or even seeing their numbers, like, oh, I know he's got a bunch of little cards. I'm not
Yeah,
really.
the screen is one of the best cards in the deck.
So we should,
But enough information. What was the question?
So
the
we'll
right
get into
information.
the
And I would
specific
say,
cards.
I would say no. I would agree with Adam.
Yeah.
There was definitely too much information. Being able to know exactly what was in your opponent's hand at all times, being able to have to go to lengths to hide the top of your deck, to not know what that is, to have to essentially shuffle under the table so you didn't look like. I was fighting against the urge. I'm like, I can't look at my deck while I'm shuffling it, because then I'll be like, I'm going to want to stop shuffling when
At
a
this
card
spot.
that I need's at the top, or because I know what card I need and I can see how my cards are being shuffled, and that is too much information, and it's just very tempting to want to cheat.
Well, and you could even know with the number on the back, once you get familiar enough with the cards, you can know every number on the back, what they correspond to, and how they are affecting the game. So I can know that when Adam has a pink 1, and I can see the 1 on the back of the card, I know he's going to attack me, and I know he's got extra attack power. So I better be able to outdo his
Yeah,
defense.
I could even tell you what every single one of these ones are. And
Yeah.
after one game,
Yeah.
I've got all these memorized. These are easy. 2
Yeah.
defense, 2 attack.
Well, and
Right.
it just seems like the same
9
information is
capacity.
on both sides of
Capacity.
the card. Like,
Yeah.
and honestly, these
playing an
fives,
open-handed
these
game.
numbers would have been great on the actual side of the card it was supposed to be on. So I know, okay, I'm drawing this one and I'm playing it.
Yeah.
So, but to go back to the question of, is it in regards to it being specific towards balance? Well, the fact that we all have that information means yes, it is balanced, because we all have access to that information, as long as we can know that it's balanced in that regard. So,
It never seemed imbalanced.
But that does give players who've played the game before an edge.
It does.
That's true.
absolutely.
You know, but that's an edge that goes away after one playthrough, so
Yeah.
whatever, because
Whatever,
then
take
you
that
know
for what
anybody
that's worth.
can memorize the card. So yeah.
So then the next balance question is, can a player mitigate the effects of a few bad turns during the game? And I think that Ryan and I experienced this. Adam had a good chance to get back from the game and get back in, but it also depends on the luck of the draw. So I don't think it's so much about mitigation, because you and I, towards the end, were just looking, okay, we got to cycle
Yeah.
through our deck to be able to get the ship out, but I can't get the ship
And
out.
I think that was on me. Like I had 2 bad turns at a point where I had no ships out and everybody was in murder mode.
Right.
So like I had 2 bad turns at a time where it was really bad to have 2 bad turns.
I'm just saying
I would
that-
say, yeah. I mean, I would say overall, like I did always feel if I can just get a ship out, I'll be okay, or I'll be in a much better position.
Right.
And
I
as
agree.
as long as that, like, I might have more information on this question later, but as long as I always feel that I'm just like 1 ship away or just needing 1 card away, kind of, from getting back into the game, I guess I would have to say yes.
But
to
so
that
for my
question.
problem with that, I experienced the same thing, except that I needed 2 ships because everybody else who was still on the board had 2 ships. So I needed to get 2 ships out, and I was having a hard enough time getting 1 ship out that I felt like if I don't get, because it's going to take 1 hit from each of you to kill me, or 1 hit from one of you to kill me, and if you have 2 ships, you can guarantee hit me. So
Well, but I think the most interesting thing about this game didn't come to me until the very end when I thought, wow, it's really challenging to figure out how to buy these right and balance your hand right, because in most games, in most deck builders, you can buy just the great cards
You just want good
and
cards,
throw the
yeah.
one big card out. You have to draw a combo of 3 correct cards to do anything to get a ship out at the time when everyone's attacking, because the game, everyone just drew and banked and
Fought,
sabotaged
yeah.
each other for the first half of the game, and then in the second half, if you didn't have ships out, you just got trashed like quick. And if you lost them, like you're saying, now you have to catch up 2 ships, which means 2 turns in a row. You have to get the right combos, and you had bought a lot of purples.
And I had the way to defend against a lot of that, and I did. I kept my ships out for a long time, but I think the ways that I lost both of my ships were the Doomsday device.
Yeah.
And there's no mitigating that. So
That
I
was
lost. I had a way to mitigate my ships being destroyed because I was stacking my deck with the tactics cards, and that was my plan the whole time. But if somebody gets good Doomsday devices,
Yeah, that's
on
pretty
me,
lucky, though.
It means that
We
but
had
it
a lot
happened
of
to
those
me
games.
It
twice.
does happen. It
So
does
I'm-
happen.
It
It happened
happened
5 times in the game.
It happened
Yeah.
enough that
crazy.
it can't be really mitigated. So if that's the question,
Well,
it can't. That one alone can't be mitigated, but that's rare. So I'm not saying that's a problem. I'm just saying that
It
there are
does happen.
situations in which I don't feel like I can mitigate a bad turn.
But you had
it's
a-
not all turns. It's
a very
few.
difficult time even getting 1 ship out.
Oh, yeah.
To my point is, you have to, the way you're building your deck is
Oh, I agree.
very complicated.
I agree.
Which is interesting to me.
Yeah.
So, but I think a lot of that's on us, not necessarily on the game.
I agree.
You got to get really good
Yeah,
at building
I
your deck.
mean, I do feel like I pitched the most cards, but I also bought my every option. So I did have a lot of really good options for my hands, but I had a huge deck. So
Yeah. It was a trade-off.
it was a trade-off. I was pitching all the bad ones, so I don't know.
So the next question is, the next section is clarity, and this is looking like it's particularly on the rules and things like that. The first question is, are the rules easy to understand? And I mean, Ryan's probably the best to answer that question.
So yeah, as the rules person who generally does the initial reading of the rules and trying to suss it all out, I'm actually going to answer all 3 of the next questions you have here, which are they easy to understand, are there enough examples, and are they easy in a logical flow to reference them during play? The answer is no to all 3. You saw how many questions we sent you in emails to clarify things. You even felt the need to send some clarifying stuff unprompted to us to let you know about things that you knew weren't in there already. So the rules are definitely a work in progress. Just as a general guideline for how to organize them, you should start off with an introduction statement, setting the scene, which you do already. You should quickly, go over all of the components, give a list of how a turn goes, and just explain it kind of as you need to. Just quickly explain it with just a sentence for each kind of section you want to take, and then go into depth about each section in order for each turn. And then have a kind of glossary or FAQ at the end. When you talk about the Admiral turn and being allowed to attack with the Admiral, that's when you go through what combat is. So give everybody just a quick 1, 2, 3, pick your role, do your action, do this, bum, 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 then break down all the rules and keep everything really in that logical order. Because people are going to want to know, okay, I just chose to attack. I don't want to have to change 3 pages until I figure out exactly how to attack. So, just in general, and ultimately, I feel that we figure out how to play the rules or play the game. You can let us know, if we even ended up playing it correctly or not. Ultimately, I had to get things from 3 different documents and ask you a bunch of questions. And so your rule book, were the rules, once we figured out the rules, they were easy enough. Like once we started playing, you didn't see us referencing the rule book a lot, which, like I said, was good because it wasn't really a good thing to reference.
Though I would-
you did totally miss out for reinforcements. You need some kind of reference card for reinforcements. The only way you find out what any of these things mean or do is in the back of the thing. I would actually just print the cost on these. I don't know how much.
On the benefit.
Yeah, like definitely, having just the same art for all of them when you could explain, the cost and benefit in that same space is I think that's what I'd do, or make a reference card for what each of them mean.
Yeah, because I thought about using them a few times, and then I was just like, it's not really worth it to go and try and figure them out, because now I'm revealing potential strategy to
Right.
other people, because, I'm thinking about maybe revealing this, so I can't grab that in the middle of the game and say, hey, what does this rule mean? So I
It's
think,
never on my mind.
Oh, I forgot these existed.
Yeah.
but I think
Yeah.
that these need some reference card or something.
Yeah,
at
because
least.
people just don't know what to do with them. So, and I think that goes back to having too many roles, because that is a sub-action of the Chancellor role. That's the second thing the Chancellor can do. So you have three different roles that essentially do the same thing with different cards, and then one role that has 2 nearly opposite actions that it can do. So, and it doesn't really matter
Oh, weird.
what's stopping you from just having.
I read that once, and I read decommission one starship, and I was like, I don't want to decommission anything.
Yeah,
Increase your
or
treasury.
spend credits.
I
to
never
spend-
even got
yeah.
to that part.
Or spend credits to
I had
send
that
a
same
reinforcement, and you're just like, why is that? Why are there 2 things? So I pick Chancellor, and then I have to make another decision. Why isn't that just a role individual of Chancellor? Why isn't decommission a starship, Chancellor, and then Captain? Spend credits to get reinforcements. I think, so the rules definitely need some work, and I think some of the work that they need.
Yeah. Anybody else on any rule stuff? Okay. So design is next, and the first question is, does the game elements match the theme?
Game elements match this.
So if you mean by elements, the components and the cards and the pictures and the art and the graphics and the flavor text and things like that,
Yes.
there is a fair amount that matches, yes. I do think that for me there's some hiccups in the way they match. For example, if according to your lore we are 4 different factions that have been segregated from one another for 100 years, and we all end up having the exact same technology, we all have the exact same ships, we all have the exact same weapons, and we have everything similar.
Except for one thing, one action.
Except for,
Right,
yeah,
except for your
one ability.
asymmetric
one
ability,
That's it.
which is very minimally different. It doesn't even feel like it's same to me. With that in mind, if there's so many cards here, to me, I don't understand why the trade row is not just one thing when every card is the exact same. Why is it that accessible to everybody? Why do we each need our own separate? So there's a little bit of a disconnect to me. I love the idea of having it being this individual separate thing if the Brethren faction plays different than the Covenant faction.
Yeah.
If
Right.
if there is some sort of uniqueness to these decks, but there is a disconnect.
and I would say that there is also with having the individual marketplaces, there's no sense of trade to me.
Right.
Trade to me is we have a central marketplace. There's some way, like there was no point in this game where I could trade with anybody. I couldn't say, I'll give you my Doomsday device for your crew. Or so there was just no real trading
Right.
here. There was, I mean, just on that
Or
basic,
competition,
Right.
like auction to get
right?
you
Just
the
on that
others,
basic, there was just no. I mean, trading is a very. I mean, people know what trading is. It's a
Yeah.
mechanic that's very easy to put into a game. I give you a card, you give me one or two cards. You know, it's trading, and that's not in here.
The game's called Trade Worlds.
Yeah,
Right?
Trade
Right.
Wars.
Even giving somebody
Worlds?
credits.
Or Trade Worlds. Yeah, sorry. So yeah, like there's no actual trading in the game, and the crew as being the defense of the ship seem odd to me. I mean, you clearly have like weapons, and then the opposite to that is shields or plating, depending on what kind of space universe you want to create. And we're having the crew be the defense value of the ship.
Well, and I read one of these ships, and it says, looking to test your limits with a crew of over 1,000 members, this destroyer has formidable capacity. So it's
Right.
already got 1,000
Yeah,
people
capacity
in it.
says crew to me.
And then you're buying
Right.
more crew to defend.
Right. So it seems to me like this ship already has a crew of 9. And so you can use that crew of 9 to operate 5 weapons and 4 shields, or 4 shields and 5 weapons. You know, like I said the same thing twice, but you know what I mean. So then you decide, okay, you have 9 crew members to assign to either weapons or shields. How do you do that? And that, I think, makes thematically a lot more sense.
Well, and then there's a few other things like that are a little confusing with like the theme tie-in, and I think you have this lore type of flavor text on both sides of the card, and there is, in some ways, this feeling of a linear storytelling, and I'm not really getting the storytelling. I didn't even read a ton of it because I just was lost by this story, lost by this theme or what was going on in it, because I didn't really understand what it was. And then these numbers confused me in saying every card had a 1. At first I was like, oh, maybe this is story part number 1, or maybe this is something to do with the game.
your
and-
first bullet point.
Yeah, and it was just because that ties in with the same shape on your cards. It didn't make sense to me how that affect my homeworld. Was that something? It just
very distracting and unnecessary.
yeah, it didn't tie that into the theme like I was thinking that was going to. But the next question is kind of ties into it. It says, does the theme make sense or does it feel pasted on?
Yeah. I would say ultimately pasted on, especially with, you call it Trade Wars
Worlds.
or Trade Worlds, and there's no trading. And 2, oh shoot, I just lost it. Oh yeah, nope, lost it again. Oh yeah, the biggest thing I feel that kind of misses with the theme being pasted on is, at least so far as we've encountered it, you have to decide, everybody gets the same win condition. We all have to decide when we start, are we more or less doing a military themed game, or are we doing like a trade themed game? I feel that for this to work, especially where your setup is just like, is this going to result in war or power? Like, everybody gets to choose their route to victory. I think an economic victory and a military victory should always be on the
viable,
table,
yeah.
and they should be balanced against each other. So I should be able to decide, do I want to go for a trade victory, or do I want to go for a military victory? And I couldn't do that, and I feel that also adds to the kind of pasted on feel of the theme. I'm doing one or the other. I almost have 2 different games here,
Right.
which is kind of why I have 2 different sides to my cards that both look like they're playable. So if I'm playing an economic game, I'm really just playing with this side of the card, and if I'm playing a war game, then I'm really just playing with this side of the card.
So that kind of maybe ties into the next question a little bit. Do the cards have sufficient relevant information?
I think we've already
We kind of
answered
touched in that, is that, probably too much relevant information.
Yeah.
If you have any specific questions with that one, we can answer. we can go back into that one.
Well, I didn't find any reason, I honestly, because this was easier to see, I did not ever play the front sides of my cards.
Because you just knew what they were
I played
on.
I just knew what they were going to be, and the number's bigger here, and it gives me the quickest relevant information. I've never read this flavor text here, never
No.
read the flavor text over here. This one, this one is a narrative. It's not flavor text. The
Right.
back one. The front one is a flavor text. Equipped with some training and good track record, you'll be pleased to have this crew, or to command this crew. That's just, it's flavor on the crew. This one is Varos befriended
It's some history.
Richter, then while the Acolyte engineer was drunk and asleep, stole the designs to the prototype for the Covenant. I mean, that has nothing to, it's not flavoring this
Yeah.
card, it's just this story that's, like you said, playing out over all these cards, and I'm trying to find one that's ever the same, and I can't find one. Like, there's literally a unique story going on every single one of these cards.
And it seems like it's
that they don't
different,
make.
but
Well, and ultimately, the only information you need is on the purple card on the opposite side. It's telling you what it does. Increase your resistance by 1 until destroyed. So that's everything else doesn't really have to be there, and it kind of can distract. And especially when you might want to hide information, just having a blank side would be wonderful.
Yeah.
And you could honestly just turn over one side of the deck, and as soon as you buy it, it goes upside down. Nobody knows what it is. They don't. No
Just
one knows
standard
what's in your
deck builder.
discard
Yeah.
pile. No one knows what's coming, so they can't.
You don't
guess.
know what's on the top of your
Yeah,
deck.
you don't know what's on the top of your deck. It would solve a
You
lot
can
of
pick
problems.
cards randomly. Like I just didn't want to do the smuggler because choosing 3 cards at random from my opponents was
confusing and hard to figure
just
out how to do.
we just didn't want to do it yet because when we tried it on our test playthrough, I just ended up rolling a die until I got enough cards at random, and it took too much time and it was boring. And I certainly couldn't just pick 3 cards at random because both sides give me enough information to tell exactly what card I'm pulling. And for the same reason, Colin couldn't just give up 3 cards at random because there's no way he could look at his hand and pick 3 cards randomly without having some
Yeah,
kind of
what we,
information.
ended,
Yeah.
what we ended up
Maybe,
doing
yeah.
was
Right.
like rolling a die,
So-
saying like this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the 6 is re-roll, and it took forever to
And
figure out.
I
how to do it.
think, and this kind of just rolls. I mean, we just want to roll us into the next question. Are the cards themselves attractive to the gamer? And ultimately, the answer is one side of them, yes.
I would say
I
that-
think ultimately you do
I think
have.
they're pretty.
They are very
They,
pretty.
they look
So-
great,
But just
I
just
like
put a
the
card
art a
back
lot.
on it.
No, it was interesting
No,
to
no.
me. So
Yeah.
when I got
These are
the
cool
decks,
cards.
I ended up sorting them. I had no idea what the rules were. So the way that it works is that I get the games, I take care of the setup and all that. Ryan ends up reading the rules, so I don't really know what's going on. So if something needs sorting or whatever like that, and I have the game, I have to figure it out intuitively. And so I'm not really reading the rules for authenticity. But when I was looking at these cards, not knowing the differences, I was like, oh, there's weaponry, there's food, there's minerals. This is really interesting. And then on the other side, I've got alpha and other things there. And it's really interesting and intriguing and pretty. But then it was a bit of a letdown getting into the game.
Playing with it, I think it became confusing and
Yeah.
frustrating. And you, ultimately, like I said, I think that just the card design that you have, the art that you have is good, but then just put a regular card back on the back, because
Screen.
it just becomes frustrating playing with it and shuffling wrong, and some having them some face one way, some face the other way, other players knowing what you have. So ultimately, like I said, I think one side of your cards is really good, and I think you just have too much of a good thing because you essentially, there's no way. I mean, if you have to in the rules say this is the front of the card, this is the back of the card, you have a poorly designed card. I think we know.
Well, and maybe it's
like,
using it for the expansion, like it is using those
it,
for the expansion.
the only
but
only
problem with
information that's on is this word food here.
Well, and the
that
problem
could
with
be
that
put
is-
down at the bottom here.
Oh, exactly.
Or somewhere else.
But the problem
or,
with having it like that is that if it's dependent on an expansion, if the design of the card is dependent on an expansion, and it makes the base game unplayable, you've just basically made it so that nobody wants that expansion.
right.
And therefore not the original game.
and therefore not the
So
So I have a handful of things to say about these cards. Actually, I think the art is really good. It's
Definitely.
very
Yes,
attractive.
the
I like
art's
it. I
really
think the
good.
graphic design needs to start over completely. I don't understand so much about these cards, and I'm not. I'm just being honest. Like when I hold my card like any normal
Uh-huh.
card, I have no information whatsoever. I'm holding this backwards, by the way. So when I fan it out left to right like normal, and my hand
Show the camera, not me.
and my hands down here hold the cards,
Uh-huh.
you have 3 places with information usually. This is the wrong example. So you have information up here, which is the attack or defense. You have this just telling you whose card it is, my icon, and then down here the trade value of it. Well, as I fan this thing out, I lose all of that relevant information and can only tell what color it is, which I could tell from the back anyways. My thumbs are covering up the trade information, how I hold it, so now I'm going to have to hold it differently. And all I can see when I fan it out from left to right, because I'm right-handed, is, well, and I read left to right, and I don't know if anyone fans it out backwards.
Well, if you hold it in your right hand, though, you can see the on the
Right.
bottom.
Anyways,
well, and then the other part
but
of
when
that-
I look, so half of these are backwards, and I can't even tell.
that's the
Right,
problem.
that's the problem.
The big number is hidden, so you can't even really
You
tell
can't-
sometimes.
well, you
when
can't
I
tell
hold
at
this,
a glance
I have no information
if
other
it's
than
the
these
front
are my
or the back.
cards.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well,
that's why the numbers on the front, I think, would be easier because I'm like, okay, I can see
Right.
1, 2, 3.
and to keep going, okay, this is food. Is it a food ship? Is it a
It's for
Hall
the
membership?
expansion. This is for the expansion.
But exactly,
when
that's
you have
confusing.
when you
is
have
this
colonies out.
Palmer Cruise
Yes,
and
but-
food cruise?
Yes. Stop.
But no,
let
but
me
still.
let me explain. But yes,
In the-
these are used in the expansion. So when you trade in certain resources, if they're of a certain type, their value is increased.
Okay.
So in other games, the type of card, a 5 polymer, is going to be worth more than a 5 food.
Okay, but to the topic I'm on, which is graphic design, the whole point of graphic design is to help make it's the user experience, it's the user interface, it's trying to make the game very
Accessible.
easy to use. There's so much information on these cards that can be consolidated down to not even use up one side of this card
Right.
and have still a beautiful big space for art and not all this extra stuff that's really confusing to me. And it never seemed useful to me. Maybe in an expansion that I haven't played yet, it will be much more useful.
But even that, like Ryan was saying, even in an expansion, you can take the useful portion. What is it? It's minerals, and you can put it on the block area of the card, except for the tactics cards. You can put
Where
it
the
on
play
where
text
this
or the-
this flavor text is, because you can now say that this is food, and it's there. But even with that, again, it gets to this point where if you're putting something in a base game that is not going to be applied,
Yeah.
you're inevitably going to cause confusion to your players, which
Right.
is a chance you have to take, whether or not that's worth it for the expansion, or do you want to make the base game the best that it can be?
Right. Resource type is never mentioned in the core rules.
Right.
So another thing, I feel like, what was I going to say? Oh, I feel like a lot of this, the reason for it being like this is so when it's in your bank or it's in your marketplace, you're not showing someone potentially what you're about to buy, right? I'm
Right.
assuming that's the only logical explanation for this. However, again, all the information is here to everyone. They already
Right.
know what these are. And in every deck builder game I've played, it's not that I know, oh, he's got his best card out there, he might buy it, uh-oh.
Right.
It's when he puts it into his deck, when's it going to come out? I know you're going to get good cards at some point. That's never, like, I never look
That's
over
not the
at
bit of information
Collins.
that needs to be hidden
Right.
in a deck builder.
Right.
It's
So
not
it's
who
not
buys
like-
what, because normally the market's for everybody.
Right. Let's put market information on the back and let's put player information on the front. Well, one, they all match, so player information is already showing
Right.
anyways. But even if it wasn't, even if all of these were different, I don't care when you buy it. That's not what matters
It
to me. It's
doesn't
when
affect
it
you,
comes
yeah.
out. And even just making all these colors, I know so much about what's coming out in someone's hand, and that's when it's important. And so I don't see any reason, any logical reason for things to be like this. I'm finding myself wanting a
information,
screen
right.
for every card.
I
And
definitely,
so
these
often-
cards should just be one-sided. There should be a card back that has art on it and no information, nothing, just
I think
like
we're all
a
in
playing
agreement
card.
on
Yeah.
that.
Well, and it was interesting at the start, but it did not.
No.
It was an interesting gimmick that didn't. Oh, it was an interesting attempt or graphic design move at the start.
was
to me.
unique and new.
By the end, it turned out to just be a gimmick to me that was
Yeah.
really
That didn't pay off.
and frustrating.
Constantly
and,
confusing and frustrating.
Yeah.
Well, I want to talk about specifically about this expansion and the cards that we used to
The
buy
scenario.
for the scenario we used for the Battlefront. Like Punisher, starting off with all those cards. I wasn't really tempted to use those very much based on the fact that they only boosted certain ships, starships. So if I didn't have a trader ship out, I couldn't really use it on that card. Or
Right.
the
The Defender didn't make sense.
Defender, there's certain. I just didn't want to use them. I liked them that they gave you 5 trade value, but other than that, I didn't feel compelled to use them on my actual ships.
Yeah, I never
If
used
I
them.
had it in my hand, I wanted to spend it on something because it didn't seem like it was worth actually putting on a ship. And I think that's a problem. I think you need to make them a little more generic so that they're going to boost whatever ship you're going to put them on, and you really want to be incentivized to use that whenever you get it. If that's going to be your expansion and that's going to be this particular scenario that's going to make it fun and interesting, I
Right.
think you need to make it something that you actually want to play on your ships, and I didn't get that experience out of using these particular cards.
I'd agree. I didn't want to play any of them either. Really, the Punisher was good.
Punisher was good.
And that was honestly, the Punisher was good, and then the Stealth one was good, but the other ones were fine, and they had cards in there that negated them.
Yeah,
so
the
half
third
the
one was
cards
specifically
just
to negate
negate
something,
other
yeah.
cards, or 2 of the cards just negated other cards. So 2 cards just had cards that negated themselves, and then the other 2 were like, okay, if I've got nothing else to do, I guess I'll do an entire turn to do this. So I don't think if your goal was to get people to play a ship, earn that retrofit, put it on that ship, and get these ships and get these powered up ships, I never thought that a good idea, that those seem like really a
Just
good
spend my
idea.
time doing
I would
Yeah,
have liked
and my
if you could
credits.
really boost a ship is put 2 guns on a ship or put multiple defensive crews on a ship so you can really
Right.
have more capacity on your ship.
Let the
so you can
retrofit
really
increase
have
the
this,
capacity or
this
something.
really beefed up guy that you're really going to have to do something. You're going to have a doomsday device to blow this thing up. Otherwise, there's no chance.
But to touch on this scenario specifically, as far as your scenarios go, you've got your Space Wars and your Trade Wars, and then you got Battlefront and your Rise of the Monarch. I see no need to use Space Wars or Trade Wars when I have Battlefront and Rise of the Monarch.
Right.
And
But
I don't think it adds any real extra complexity to the game that makes it so that I would be like, oh, I will never, after having played Battlefront, I will never go back and play Space Wars.
I honestly, yeah, but to be perfectly honest with you, I'm with Colin. The Space Wars
yeah.
it might as well be the same as
Yeah, it's
Space
the
Wars
same
for
as
as
Space
much as
Wars.
it's
It's
Space
exactly-
Wars with $5
With
bonus
a few
cards
options.
that I
$5
don't
cards.
want to actually attach to my ship.
But they're good in that you auto get 5 cards so that your spending power is a little bit better, or
Right.
your ability to bank is a little better.
Right.
So that's nice that you don't have to go through
They're
You
just
just get
saying
some
most
free
of the
fives,
value
but
is in their
like-
market.
Exactly.
But I
Value.
don't care about putting them on ships.
No, I
so.
didn't once put them on ship, but I liked having 5s in my hands, and that was an easy way to get them.
Yeah. So I think we just answered if this
Most
meets
of
or
these,
exceeded
yeah.
expectations.
And the
and
next
then rules
one-
cover the necessary details to play, or did it lack clarity?
16 is probably the next one.
So yeah, and then personal thoughts on the overall appearance of the game. So yeah, so personal level thinking and discuss your personal level of thinking and the overall level of downtime experienced. I thought early enough when it was, it moved quick enough when we were building our ships, and then later on the downtime seemed a little much as it just became more obvious what the plays were going to be, and then you just realize, oh, I need to start looking. The more we learned about our cards and could then look at our opponent's hand and figure out what they were doing, the longer the downtime came. And so that's my biggest concern, is there was too much information. Definitely got to be a point where there was too much information for each player on their turn that made their turns way too long. And I was done.
Well,
you know?
yeah, I think we played over 2 hours, and I think something you could do to help that is like, well, you have 18 power on a person,
Homeworld.
and so you can take it down to 12 or 6 if you want to make that a quicker game. I don't know if there's any way you could get this down to 30 minutes, if that's what was suggested for a playtime.
Yeah, which sounds about right for this game.
And also, like, if you're knocking somebody out of the game, like Adam could have
Was
been knocked
within
out
very early.
almost immediately, but I didn't want to knock him out
Yeah.
because that just seems
I
not
did.
very fun.
Right.
And like even knocking you guys out too.
Right.
It just like it kind of feels bad when you have elimination of somebody. Like
Especially that
having
early
played
on.
Commander and Magic, like sometimes you're sitting out for an hour and a half, and it's just
Right.
it's not fun to do that.
Yeah.
So
So this next question, I'm just going to have everybody answer individually, and it's a rating of the game. So I'll read what
considering
the
this expansion
Yeah.
particularly.
considering specifically the
Battlefront
scenario. So we're going to rate this game from a 1 to 10, 1 being terrible, 10 being exceptional. 1 to 3 is unacceptable, meaning that it's not well designed, poor rules, unoriginal, dull play. 4 to 6 is average, its design is okay, rules are understandable, some originality, play is acceptable. 7 through 10 is good, well designed, rules are clear, very original, interesting play. Does anybody want to kick that off?
To the whole, or assessing
Just
the whole
for the
game,
game
not
right
the
now.
theme itself or the mechanics.
Right.
The whole game. Overall.
Just the game. Yeah, I'll start off. I'll give it a 4. I think design is okay, poor rules, and then I would say there's definitely some originality to, and then play is. I would actually say play is interesting. So maybe I'll give it a 5. So I want to take like 2 or 3 things out of the middle category, and then 1, definitely poor rules as the rule book exists. Like once we figured it out, I don't think necessarily your game has bad rules, but you have not figured out how to communicate them in writing yet.
And I'll go next. I'm going to go with 4. And I think it's, because I don't think it's quite an average game. I think it's a little bit below average, but I think there's a few tweaks that you can do to bump it up a little bit for me. But at the state the game is in, I couldn't give it up to the 7 to 10 range, where I think this is a game that I would play in place of another game. I think that there's a lot of potential for the different things, and there's a lot of things that really intrigue me and make me excited about the potential for this game. But kind of like what Ryan's saying is that there's a few barriers there with the rules, particularly to get into it, to really get that feeling. And there's some hang-ups that are pretty significant, like the graphic design that makes it so that I would rather play a game that is just easy to see what my stuff is and go through that. So it's not bad to me, but it's slightly below average.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go with about a 4 also. But saying that, I will say if you had this screen card on the back of every single card, you could put that up to about a 7.
Oh, really? For you?
Yeah. Like there's just way too much information that you can know.
It
takes
changes
it up a
changes
lot.
the game fundamentally.
Absolutely.
Knowing what your
But
opponents
you'd
are
call
always
it an
It would
excellent above
fundamentally-
average game if you put screens.
I would
No, it's
say
just
the
good.
7.
It doesn't necessarily
7 is
above
good.
average.
7
It
is
is
good.
above average, but yeah.
I enjoyed it. Like I tried to pretend when I was playing that I didn't know what was going on. I tried not to look at these guys' hands and imagine what it would be like if there was just a card back on everything that was so generic that I didn't know what people were doing. But knowing that, especially in the end, during the space battle with Adam, that he had a bunch of purple upgrade cards or bump cards. I just... It spoiled the fact that I knew that I could win. That I knew I had another ship in my hand,
Yeah.
and it just was a matter of time before he was going to lose because he needed to get 2 ships out before. So that experience was just not as good as it could have been. It was disappointing, and I just knew I was going to win. And just oversaturated with information that didn't have anything to do with the actual gameplay. All of the flavor text and the background. I mean, it's interesting when you first kind of read it, but after you play 3 or 4 times, you're just going to be like, this is just useless information that doesn't have anything to do with any of that. And particularly for this scenario, as I said, I didn't want to use the cards other than for boosting my money or boosting my trade value. I didn't want to put those on my ships, and for this particular scenario, yeah, that's a 4 or 3. It didn't add anything to the base game.
I would give it a 4 as well, not to be repetitive, but the way you worded that made me think, well, I can't call it a bad game. The 1 to
wasn't a
3,
bad
so I
game.
couldn't put it in 1
It's
to 3.
not unacceptable.
But then
Right.
I also can't say it's an average game either. So I'm riding the line between a 3 and a 4. I think graphic design cleanup, I think tweaks that you can make to just the player experience that we've all discussed here, at best could bump it up to a 5 or a 6 for me.
Right.
Without mechanical changes, to me, there's no way this game can get into the 7 or higher range. I think even just with our tweaks, it would bump it up maybe just to a 5 to me. The 6, I think, would require mechanical changes for me as well, where it's still in the top end of the average game range.
I feel the exact same thing. I want these to be unique. I want a unique experience from deck to deck, and that alone would make me feel a lot better with the graphic design.
I think there's
changes.
lots of things we can say for mechanical changes.
Oh, absolutely.
But that's really not what the question is, and nor I guess what we're doing
Right.
here. But we love giving design help and development help, and we love all that stuff. But I think this video, the purpose of it is to just assess what's here. And to me, it's borderline 3 to 4. Even with all the changes you can make to this game as it is, probably gets it up as high as a 5 to me. And I think it's struggling to be interesting to me. The one thing that was interesting about this game that makes me want to dig a little deeper and play some more is trying to figure out how I balanced my hand, because I was pretty well balanced for a while, but then I didn't have any purples, and I saw how well the purples were serving Tyson, so I went and bought a bunch of purples. But then when I lost the ship, I couldn't get that 3-card combo in my hand again. It was so hard to do. And even and I had to keep attacking to keep down everyone else's ships, but then I couldn't attack and draw extra cards to try to build the ship, and it just became very difficult. And so that was interesting. I would like to come back in to see how do I crack that code there. But outside of that, everything's knowable to me. I understand exactly how this game's going to play out. The only thing that changes it other than that is who's going to pick on who. And it's just not an interesting choice to me.
Yeah. So there's one other question, but I think that we've basically addressed it. It's again a ranking of 1 to 10 for ranking fun factor. And it says, please rate the game from 1 to 10 in terms of your own personal ranking. And for me, it's just going to, I think I said everything I needed to say in the previous ranking.
Yeah, I think just ultimately, if you just want to talk about pure fun factor, ultimately it was not as fun as I wanted it to be. I saw some potential, but there was just a little too much going on, and there was both too much information and not enough choices, I think. That ultimately it just wasn't, like, I wanted it to be more fun than it was. I found some times where there were interesting choices, but yeah.
Well, and one thing that we did talk about that could be added into this game to make it a little more unique, a little more fun, is incorporating these roles into the actual cards. Like, for instance, putting the mechanic on one of these cards that you could actually buy, so you could, like, discard 3 cards or, like, lose 3 cards from your We talked about that
Just
last time we
remember
played.
talking.
That you could incorporate some of these roles into the
bake the
actual
rolls into
cards.
the cards, yeah.
To,
Well, that's how
to
a normal
make
deck
them
builder
to
is.
make them more interesting. So you could actually do mechanic and chancellor in the same turn based on the cards that you have in your deck. So that's something you could possibly do to make it a little more interesting. But it's so hard to do multiple things in one turn, and you have to really focus on one thing. And then if you do one thing, then somebody else can go in and attack you. But like all you needed to do was draw, and you couldn't put out a ship, and you're frustrated. I just didn't run into that as much as these guys did because I'd bought everything, and I just had a well balanced hand. So
I have some. My answer is different, actually. Surprisingly, I had more fun in this game than I thought I should have for the design of this game, and I'm trying to figure out why I did. And I think some of it's the art. It feels very spacey to me, and I like spacey. I like ships. It's just kind of an easy theme that always works. It's like Cthulhu or whatever. Just people love it whenever you put out a space theme. So I like that. I liked just fighting each other. There's just some really tried and true mechanics, not mechanics, but
Tropes.
yeah, parts of the gameplay that just work, parts of the theme that just worked. And I actually had more fun than when I look at this game from a design or development perspective, I would rate it much lower than I would how much fun I had. And I think that fun factor can continue to go up again with some of the cleanup. That could probably get up to a 6 to me, the fun factor, but I still wouldn't put it into the upper tier without mechanical changes. So that being said, I think it's worthwhile. You've got something here that to me is just fun, but the design and the mechanics pull it down. And I think if you were to be willing to consider mechanical changes to this game and actual design changes to this game, not just development, I think there's potential to get what is existing here into that 7 to 10 range for me. But with the mechanical help, so that's how I'd say.
Okay. Well, great. So that's the review, and we're going to play Rise of the Monarch next. So thanks, and we'll see you, I guess, back in the game.